I want to welcome Dr. Alison Fox-Resnick. We are familiar with her in this network, and we are so happy to have her here with us today to continue to think with us about professional learning and our roles in supporting those that we serve. And so, Alison, I am going to stop sharing my screen so that you can take right over, and we have the next from now until lunch to spend this time with Alison. So please welcome her with a little clap for chat, and we'll be on our way.
Hello, everyone. It's so great to be here with you today. Um, I have been looking forward to this since when was it? August, when we were together last. I do just want to give you the heads up that, of course, I have both my 7-year-old and my 2-year-old homesick today. So if there's some surprising visitors in our work today, that's who they will be. Let me get started here. Okay. So this is where we're at. In August, for those of you who were there, I think most of you, we dug into some routines for really unpacking the complexity of teaching practice. And we'll do a little bit of going through what we did there in a second. We're really trying to make sense of how do we unpack the complexity of all that we're trying to support our teachers to do. And I promised at the end that then we would move towards how do we support that complex learning that we unpacked together. So that's where we're going to go today. So we're going to build off of what we did in August to really think about one way, one piece of our work. I want to emphasize that one piece of our work in supporting this complex learning. And hopefully you'll find that it can build off of what you were doing this morning. I was hoping to be able to join you to be able to support some of those connections, but I was in mom land. So definitely help us in that space. So in the chat, let's make connections across what you were doing this morning and what we are going to dive into today. So here's what we did at Institute. We tried out this set of 6 little routines to really unpack the complexity of practice. So we're going to go through that in a minute, but I realized I actually need to present with Slido. So bear with me for 1 second. Because what I'm curious about, and I'm going to bring up the Slido in a minute, I'm curious for you to think back what really stuck with you from Institute. So in a moment, there's going to be a Slido for that. As soon as this computer catches up with me. I would love for you to share what has stuck with you since Institute, if anything. Can be a tiny idea, a big idea. Since our time together at Institute, what has stuck with you, and that will help folks who weren't there maybe get a sense of the kinds of conversations we were having. And also it's good to like get our brains back to that so that we can build from it. Let's see what's coming up for people here. Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is a good little assessment for me of what felt sticky for you this summer. And let's in a moment, we're gonna just go through a little bit of some of the highlights and bring forward some of the ideas that surfaced for us. But this is really powerful to see what stuck with us. Okay. So the first thing we did, which you saw some people refer to, of really drilling into what do we want for our kids. And we went through a series of exercises. We talked to partners. We were really digging into ourselves and what we want for our readers and writers in Michigan. And this, which I love, is the word cloud we created together, everyone at Institute, when we had to pick our top 3 words for our vision for kids. So in the chat, I would love for you, oops, pick one of those words. Which one's really resonating with you today? Just drop one in the chat. Which one are you really thinking about today when we think about our kids across Michigan? Mm-hmm. Love it. So then what we did, which some people also referenced in the Slido, is we thought about how anything we do, any lesson or activity or tiny move a teacher makes, can either bring that vision to life for kids or really not, right? So we went through a series of activities. We looked at some little snippets of curriculum to say, like, this is 5 minutes of instruction. What are the things a teacher might do or say that would really bring that to life for kids to enact instruction in a way that did support empowerment and confidence and critical thinking and joy, right? Some of these words we just saw in the chat. And what might a teacher do? These little tiny things a teacher might do that would actually totally squash that. And we talked about how every tiny move sends these really powerful messages to kids about who is capable of reading and writing, what it means to be a good reader, writer, or learner, why we should persevere through challenges like figuring out new reading or new text or figuring out a new writing skill, and why reading or writing is important. This helped us really frame for ourselves how a new curriculum is what we were focusing on that day can either be just another tool that results in some new words or activities, but basically everyone just does the same thing they've always done. I think we've all seen that in our careers as educators. Or it can be a tool that really supports teachers to engage kids in more powerful ways. Those are both options can happen with a new curriculum. A new curriculum is not magic. So what we thought about then was, what shifts do we need to support? And we named it, it's actually really important to articulate it as a shift that includes both where we're starting and where we want to be, and really articulate the difference between where we kind of feel like in general our teachers might be now and where we want them to be. So I don't know if you remember, but we named hundreds of different versions of shifts that we were thinking about after really reflecting on what would bring our vision for kids to life. I'm just going to put up 4 right now. These are not complete, but this is what emerged from our thinking together in August. These were some necessary shifts we named that we thought were required really for our vision for kids to come to life. So once we named those shifts, we brought all of that together. Those first 4 little routines helped us then think about, what will teachers need to learn? If we want those shifts to happen, what will they need to learn? And we brought in 2 different frameworks that are in our design cards. And I saw people mentioning this in the Slido too. So one framework is this framework of knowing, doing, and becoming. This idea that learning new things isn't just new things you need to know, not just new things you need to do, but also this layer of becoming, or what is my job? What does it mean to do my job well? What's my role in relation to reading, writing, learning? That actually these shifts require change at the intersection really of these 3 things. And so just as an example, we unpacked how like just this tiny thing, like using turn and talk to really expand participation and have kids engage with each other's ideas, requires some new knowing and doing. Also requires teachers to really see their job as to facilitate student discussion and engagement with each other's ideas, not just a teacher's ideas or the ideas in a text, right? That's actually fundamental. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what that new knowing and doing is because that shift in my role has occurred. So that was we did some more work there in our tables, unpacking the complexity of some of this learning. But I just wanted to bring that layer of the complexity back to the forefront of our conversation today. And then the last thing we thought about is how might teacher learning unfold? So if this is our complex way of seeing the goals towards our shifts, how might teacher learning unfold? And here we really thought about moving away from, I saw a lot of people saying the thinking traps in the Slido. This is trap number 3. For those of you who are new to the thinking traps are a way to name what doesn't work, but often happens. They're not about us as individuals. They're like the recipes built into the system for like what we should do when we notice something is not the way we want it to be in an education system, right? So often we just notice something that someone doesn't have something or isn't doing something. We deliver a perfect thing and then they magically have it. That's what this thinking trap is, right? We could probably think of thousands of examples of this all around us at all levels of the system. And what we really have to do is disrupt that for ourselves. And so the framework we used for that is thinking about what are the messy trajectories that teachers move along. So we often use this like upward squiggle, but I just want to remind you that really it's often more like one of these, right? It's not always up. But this framework that comes out of studies of teachers really learning to change their practice in really meaningful ways, not kind of surface level ways, finds that there's often these 3 phases. And I want to emphasize these are messy, they overlap, and teachers can go back and forth. And not all teachers will go through all of these phases, depending what they're learning, right? But one phase you might see is that educators are really actively resisting or opposing a new expectation. Or you might see teachers are enacting it out of compliance. And the key here is that I enact it out of compliance if I do it because I was told to do it, or I feel like I'm supposed to do it, not because I think it's a powerful practice. Versus if I'm moving towards internalization, this is where the becoming piece becomes important, right? I am enacting these new practices because of obligation to myself. I would never imagine teaching any other way. I see it as really reasonable, enabling, powerful, negotiable, attainable. So what we did then is, which I'll name as an activity in your design cards or routine, is we actually worked together to unpack like what could it look like as teachers move along this trajectory. And I went through and put all of our ideas together into one thing. So let me put this link in the chat. I want to give you a moment to explore this. So go ahead and open up that link. And just take a moment to notice this was all of our ideas about it, what it might look like or sound like as a teacher is moving along the trajectory. And I love that Jenny in the chat is already thinking about some connections to what you were learning about earlier, that you can actually use this trajectory to unpack learning towards any kind of goal you might have for teachers. I'll give you a minute just to look at our messy thinking here. Okay, as always, I'll invite you in the chat. If there's something you're noticing or wondering as you look across this, definitely drop that in. Let's be in conversation about all of these things with each other. What I love about this is it captures our collective wisdom from working with teachers across lots of contexts, right? You didn't really have to think that hard, as my guess, for what these different examples would sound like. You've heard them and seen them, but to put it next to each other can help us really say, like, how do we support teachers that really incrementally move along here rather than expecting them to go right from resistance to internalization, right? What are the little moves we have to make over time to nudge people along the trajectory? And how does this help us make much more nuanced, specific sense of where a teacher's at in their learning, just like we want them to do with their kids, right? We don't want them to just say, this kid is level X of a reader. We want them to really be able to say, like, ooh, they're getting stronger at this and they're struggling a little bit with this and they're not sure about this. We want them to really be able to drill down into the specifics of what's happening for their learners. And what I find this trajectory helps us do is do the same thing for our teachers as learners. Okay, so that was what we did in August. Now the question becomes, how do we support that? How do we support people, our teachers, to move along the trajectory as they're learning something new towards this powerful vision we have for how our kids will relate to and see themselves in relation to reading and writing? So just like we said in the summer, a curriculum can either be just a tool that nothing changes, or a tool that really helps kids experience way more powerful instruction. What I want to propose here is that you can say the same thing about any professional learning experience. Any professional learning experience can either just be something that teachers went to and then go back and maybe say some new words that don't actually really change the way they're teaching. I know I did that as a teacher many times. Or it can be something that really helps me puzzle through new ways to engage my kids, right? And that's where the trickiness of our job comes in, is how do we support it to be a powerful tool and not just something that teachers go and participate in or sit through and then go back and keep doing exactly what they've always done. So that's what our design cards are really aimed at helping us think about, is how to design systems that really support people to move along the trajectory. And in the summer, we thought about, as we just talked about, this pink one, the new ways of doing knowing, doing, becoming, and we thought about this complex learning trajectories piece. Today, what we're going to zoom in on is coherence. And I want to just name, like, this is just one piece of the work we need to do, but that's going to be the piece that we zoom in on today. And here's what I want you to be able to sit with for the next little bit. That coherence is a craft. We're going to get into what that means, but it's not something we do in 1 minute or 1 moment or one event. And it's everyone's job across the system all the time if we're really going to bring coherence to life for people. I want to just point out that these are the design cards that we're playing with here, and we're going to be moving across some of this, mapping out the messiness of our systems and enacting our roles to craft coherence. So this is right there in the design cards. And Heather's saying where they're linked, or I saw someone Shelly put them in the chat above, or just again. Thank you, Shelly. Okay, so bear with me here. Here's our teacher. They're moving along their trajectory. Here's what they're encountering or experiencing, and this is going to be incomplete. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you in chat to say, what did I miss? But here's just like some of what is around them as they're trying to move up their trajectory. So we have these different, like, big buckets of things. And then they might be in some way or another encountering some form of interaction or tools or professional learning or expectations or relationship with any of these things. And all of those pieces of the system have roles, events, tools, routines that they might be sending out to teachers or engaging teachers with. We also have things like the school board or families, right? So take a moment. What did I miss? I'm sure I missed a lot of stuff. What's here that I didn't, or what's not here? What else is on teachers' plates or other things that they're receiving expectations from or materials from or learning from? Colleagues, kids. Yep, kids are not here. You're right. What else is up here? Should be up here. Uh-huh. Union. Yep. Uh-huh. Behavior challenges. Yeah, so some of you are starting to get to this other really important layer, right? That schools do not exist in a vacuum. We have public media, we have all these different funding situations, political situations, different shifts in how people are thinking about what good instruction is, union stuff. So this is all surrounding a teacher, right? So here's what happens often as a teacher is trying to move along that trajectory, given all of this. Here they are, they're trying to move along their trajectory, and then see which teacher you feel like you were at some point in your life. I'm actually wishing I had little letters next to them so you could say which one you felt like. Uh, we've probably seen all these teachers in our own life, right? All of them. Yep, there you go. All of them at one or time or the other. We've all been here, right? And actually, when we think about this context that we just showed, it makes sense that someone would end up in one of these positions, even within one day. Yeah, Jessica, that's real for sure. And this is why change is really hard because we taught this is a slide from the summer. We talked about how teaching and leadership involves this really complex work, right? You have tons of competing demands. You have urgent, rushed problem solving, whether you're a teacher or a leader. There's really unpredictable human relationships. And all of this is within a bigger, complex system that has like complex politics, entrenched ways of doing things. All of this makes it really easy to just fall back into the habits of what we've always done and be like, nope, not going to try that new thing. Or even if we're trying the new thing, we might end up just doing what we've always done because this is the reality of how hard jobs are in educational systems. All right. So here's the other thing I would just point out. Oh, that shouldn't say math consultant. Okay. This should say if you're a literacy coach down here, this is the reality. If you're planning your really good PD or your coaching cycle, this is just a guess. You might think about what your map would look like. Your knowledge of the broader system that the teacher's experiencing looks something like this, right? Like different gray scales of how much you actually understand or don't understand about what the teacher's experiencing. And on a name that is not your fault, that is the way our system is currently enacted and designed, right? That all of us just work really hard in our little part of the system to do our best job. And we're surrounded by this much bigger system that also is interacting with our learners at all times. And we don't have that much understanding of what's happening across all these different spaces. That makes it really hard for us to really support our learners in the way we would want to. Okay, so this is my next guess. Let's just zoom in on the literacy portion of a teacher's world. And here I'm really going to need you to add things in. I was just looking at that document you were looking at earlier to capture some of this. But as we're trying to support teachers to make these shifts in literacy, here's some things. So they have the literacy coaches, right? They have assessments in their ecosystem, they have curriculum. And then I just pulled out some of the names of different of the professional learning supports and resources that are listed in the document you were processing earlier. There's also like other leaders in their ecosystem, like principals, right? These are this is a slice of what's in their world just within literacy. So again, I need your help. What did we miss? Put it in the chat. What else is in their literacy world as they're trying to navigate some of this learning and trying to really improve their instruction? Yeah, you're right. I did not put literacy essentials here. That was definitely an oversight. Yep, letters. Yep. Okay. When you list it all out like this, it really emphasizes how hard this challenge is, right? There is a lot of different moving pieces here that teachers have to try to navigate, and it would be really, really easy for them to end up as one of our different stick figures that we saw a few slides ago. Okay. So this brings us back to our our slide here about how professional learning. So if we think about some of these professional learning supports up here at the top, right? And you just name some more. Either those professional learning experiences can be experienced as really disconnected or overwhelming and not support teachers to bring that learning into their practice. That is a totally predictable outcome, actually, of how a teacher might experience this range of support. Or we can think about how we and other leaders in their system can craft coherence to really support teachers to make sense of all of these different things in relation to each other and therefore be able to bring their learning into their practice, right? And that's what's going to make the difference between whether the professional learning actually changes things for kids or not. Actually gets to I just like grabbed a little snippet of our word cloud, right? Actually gets to this being what we see in classrooms and what kids experience in classrooms or not. So, how do we craft coherence? There's two pieces of it, and what I want to emphasize is the arrows going back and forth between them because, as I said before, it's an ongoing craft. So, we have to see our systems through the lens of coherence. We just started to do that. We're going to get a little deeper. And then we can enact strategies to craft coherence over time, but we have to keep looping back and seeing what else can we see about our system as we continue to craft strategies. So let's dig in. Probably if I ask everyone, what does coherence mean? We might all have a different definition right now. Or if you, with the other leaders you work with in your context, you might all have a different definition, right? It's one of these words that we throw out a lot, but often don't sit with like, what do we actually mean by it? Here's a proposed definition that I've been playing with in the last year or so. And we're going to break it apart. But part of what this definition tries to do is something that I found that most people in education do not do when they define coherence. A lot of times when we use coherence or when researchers use coherence, they talk about it as something you could like magically achieve in a moment. Like at some point, the full system will be coherent for a teacher. I'm just going to name like that's impossible. There is so much in our systems that are not in our control. There's so many different layers of decision making. Things are evolving constantly, right? There's new surprises or evolutions in how things are happening every week. So the idea that you could somehow magically reach coherence is not possible. So let's dive into what this definition might help us think about. So the first idea that's really important here is that coherence is experienced. It's not just planned for. So we could have the best possible idea or plan for how coherence is going to come to life across our system. What matters is how teachers experience it and whether they experience it as coherent. The next piece helps us really name where coherence or incoherence might be found. So this is an idea that coherence can be either structural or conceptual. So what does that mean? Structural means that is referring to do things, the different pieces actually fit together in time and space. Do I have enough time to do all the things I'm supposed to do? Do I have enough resources? Do I have the physical space in my classroom? Those kinds of things. Conceptual means do the underlying ideas about learning, about teaching, about reading, about writing, whatever, fill in the blank, do they fit together or do they actually conflict with each other? So we're going to dig into that. And I want to name why it's really important, this step we're about to do. We're going to, in a moment, name what are all the incoherences that teachers might experience. I want to really emphasize that this is a crucial step because we have to name what's not going to feel like it fits together in order to be able to design for how we're going to support teachers to feel like it fits together. So we have to start by actually naming the things that are going to feel like they don't fit together in order to figure out what we're going to do about it. So this is what I want you to think about. As your teachers are in this literacy space that we named earlier, and you added so many other things to the chat that you should also bring into your thinking here. As they're in this space, I want you to think about what disconnects or contradictions might they experience. And you could use these ideas of structural or conceptual. So there's some sentence stems here that might be useful, but you can think about this however you want. But in the sentence stems, we see that it's from a teacher's perspective. Like, what might a teacher say? I would really encourage you to play with that. Not from your perspective, but again, coherence is experienced. How might a teacher be experiencing it? So the first one is, I'm expected to do this and this and this, and there's not physically enough time, or I'm not given the resources, or I don't have space in my classroom, right? Whatever it is. That's this structural incoherence. Um, Either structural or conceptual can be something like I'm told my district priority is, or I'm told the state priority is, or I'm told my school priority is, but this other piece of my system expects me to do something else, right? And then another thing you might play with is like across these different professional learning experiences, are there actually different ideas about certain pieces of practice? So it's worth thinking about like, are the same ideas about readers and writers and learning, reading, and writing, are those showing up similarly across these different professional learning experiences? Or might there be some disconnects that we have to help teachers with? So we're gonna go into breakouts for about 10 minutes just to chat about this. And when we come back, we're gonna share some of the ones that would come up for us. But I want to name again, this isn't about kind of wallowing in how challenging our system is. This is about naming the disconnects or contradictions that might be really hard for teachers that we want to really design our practice to support them with.
Boy,
All right.
the boy.
I would love some help with breakouts.
Oh,
Someone, there's Heather is my helper.
Here,
Okay.
I'll
Thank you,
open
Heather.
Allison.
Oh,
So,
perfect.
yeah,
Thank you.
if you did not see it pop up, if you go down to the breakout rooms icon, and if you don't see that and you hit more, sometimes you need to kind of go there and double check and it'll pop up for you.
Okay.
Allison, will you start a timer or do you want me to start one?
Group is lackluster.
All right. Coming out of those breakouts, let's capture all of our thinking that emerged. So in this Slido, what are some of the incoherences that you chatted about? And you can write one, you can write three. Let's capture the messiness of our system. So I see a lot of just, this is so overwhelming. I see a lot of, there's like many competing priorities that are being communicated to them. There might be some disconnects between curriculum and professional learning. There might be too many things. Hmm. Sometimes some of the things we know are really important for kids are not necessarily like captured in a curriculum. So that's on teachers to figure out how to bring that in. No teacher or no curriculum includes every single thing. Hmm. There's some structural incoherence around like how do we use prep time. There's this challenge of there's a pacing guide, and also I'm supposed to meet kids where they are and respond to my kids. How do I reconcile that? Hmm. Yep, there's this. I'm supposed to teach this and this and this, but I'm having just general challenges with classroom management. That's an incoherence in my life, right? So this is, I just want to emphasize, so important for us to name. If we don't name this, then we can't support teachers with it, right? I want to emphasize though, a lot of this I want to name in your particular roles, you do not have control over a lot of these things, right? The answer is not, I have to magically fix the system by myself. It's how can I be a guide for my teachers through this messiness? How can I really see this messiness and support them within it rather than kind of pretend it's not there? Because the teacher is experiencing it regardless, right? And all of us want our lives to feel more coherent. So we find coherence in whatever way we can. So when teachers say no to something or set something aside, that's actually them trying to find coherence in their experience, right? They're trying to make things fit together that make sense for them and it makes sense for the just physical time and space that they have. So here's another key idea from our definition here. Coherence is not just alignment. So often we actually use these two words interchangeably. I want to push you to not do that anymore. And probably you'll start noticing how often it happens around you. I notice it everywhere now. Here's how I think about it. So let's say if we look at our definition, it's around this shared understanding of, quote, the purpose and nature of the work, right? So you could fill anything in there. Imagine we put kind of our vision for kids there, right? That's the purpose and nature of the work, that we want them to be really confident, joyful readers and writers. If that pink dot is that vision I have, maybe in one moment in time, I think about these different parts of my system, that square and triangle and circle, and I align them in that one moment in time. That's what alignment is. Or when we say some activity is, quote, standards aligned, for instance, is another time we use that word alignment, right? Or this curriculum is aligned with the science of reading. That is saying something is fits together in this one moment of time, the way in this moment we've thought about it, right? That's not the way education works, though, right? We have to enact things over time in messy systems that are constantly evolving. So alignment is not enough to get to coherence. Instead, what happens if we think about coherence as a craft, something we do over time, something that's a little messy? If you imagine like making a collage or a painting, or maybe sewing something together, it's something you're figuring out as you go. Some researchers talk about it as like muddling through. So you have to figure it out as you go. You can't like have a plan and just enact it. So here's my messy way of representing that. Okay. So before the purpose and nature of the work, maybe our vision for kids was just one dot. Here, what if it's this pink line that goes over time? Here's what crafting coherence looks like if we have our messy system. Over time, it's thinking about how do I make this piece fit with my pink line, my purpose and nature of the work? How do I make this piece fit? How could I support a teacher to see how this piece fits? Oh, maybe for this teacher, I need to actually connect these three pieces down to the vision for kids. Maybe I need to figure out how this one fits in. Maybe I actually need to pull all four of these together to fit in with my vision for kids, right? Here's a key. Oh, shoot, that didn't work. Okay, I thought that connected in, but that was not how it was experienced, or that did not play out the way I thought it was. Actually, I need to connect these four things together in order for it to even make sense in relation to my vision for kids. And now, of course, this is also key. Now there are three new things in my system that I did not expect. And I have no control over, but here they are in my system. Now I have to think about how to help a teacher make sense of that. How does that new thing connect through other things that we have to make sense or fit with our vision for kids? And then here's a big thing that we do. We create coherence or craft coherence in little pockets in our system. So maybe we say like, here's how we're going to really craft coherence around this literacy thing. Here's how we're going to really craft coherence around this math thing. Here's how we're going to craft coherence around this other part of our system. But we don't craft coherence across all of it. Or even within the literacy world, maybe we're really thinking about how to bring assessment through in a clear way. But we do that separate from how we think about bringing curriculum through or some new professional learning through. We actually have to figure out how to make it all fit together. Or maybe someone new comes in and they missed all the coherence crafting we did over the last year, and we have to try to help them make sense of how everything fits together, right? Maybe it's that something that was smaller. If you look at this little purple circle, maybe it needs to be bigger. That's something we sometimes have to do as we're crafting coherence, is realize like, oh, actually this idea in the literacy essentials maybe needs to be much louder in our system in order for me to be able to really help teachers figure out how things fit together. And then the other piece I just want to emphasize is sometimes crafting coherence means, and I know that we don't all have control over being able to do this with all the pieces of our system, but it sometimes means taking things out or helping teachers see that is a lesser priority than this other thing. That is part of crafting coherence also. What I want to emphasize here is there's no magic recipe. I can't give you like, here's the 4 perfect steps to achieve coherence. We all have to craft it in our own systems in relation to what's coming at us and at our teachers at any moment. And that can feel really overwhelming. I want to name that. But it's also what the work has to be if we're going to support someone to move through the system. I also want to name that this is where sustainability of initiatives can live. Because often what we do in education is we implement something and we try to align everything in that moment with that thing. And then we go on ahead and leave all that work we did to, quote, align things behind. And then we wonder why things don't sustain. To sustain educational change or new initiatives, we have to be constantly crafting coherence and helping people see how that thing fits into their system. I love, Shannon, that you're connecting here to the continuous improvement process, right? We can't be done improving at any moment. It's a constant process of responding to where our system's at in any one moment. This is a way we avoid trap 3. If we imagine all these little shapes are different pieces of our literacy system. Not one of those is going to change instruction by itself. It's how we bring them all together that might have the potential to improve literacy instruction and the learning that our kids have across the state. So if we imagine again our incomplete literacy system, right? This is what we have to craft coherence around and through and across, whatever word you want to use there. And you could put a lot of things as your pink line in the middle. You could put some of these words for our vision of kids, right? Thinking, how do I help teachers see all of these different pieces in relation to this vision for kids we have? Or you could put one of the shifts that emerged from our work in August, or any other shift you're trying to support, right? If this shift is going to come to life for teachers, they need to be supported to make sense of how all these different pieces of their system relate to that shift. So again, we come back to this choice, or not choice, these two options really of what professional learning can do in our system. It could be just experience as a range of learning supports that are totally disconnected. What research shows is that's going to mean nothing changes for kids. You can have the best professional learning, the best PD session, the best series, the best webinar, the best handbook, whatever it is. If its experience is disconnected from other pieces of the system, what research shows is it's going to stay where it was. It's not going to make its way into practice. Or look at our little pink scribbly here. We can craft coherence for teachers across those different experiences to support teachers to engage in kids in more powerful ways. We can support them to bring that learning together. So there's three big ways we can do that, and I want to emphasize the distinction between these first ones. There are things in your job you have control over. There are also a lot of pieces of the system you have no control over. They are there. They're something teachers have to engage with, or it's what the option is for whatever is on the professional learning menu, right? Like there are things we have control of in our jobs and things we do not have control over. For the things we do have control over, we can really craft our system by making little design decisions so that teachers make sense of how things fit together and experience similar ideas and can figure out how they could bring it all together in a useful way in their classroom. For the things we can't control, we still have to be looking out for those incoherences so that we can support teachers. If we're noticing it as an incoherence, they probably are too, right? And for all of these things, what I really want to emphasize is the importance of paying attention to how teachers are experiencing it all so that we can design in response to that. So before, we're going to brainstorm in a moment. What are the little things we can do? And I'm going to emphasize that you should just focus on your locus of control. I know we all have ideas about how we would change broader systems. Focus on what you have control over and the little moves you could make to make it a little more coherent for teachers. So here's just two ideas that you might play with. So one crucial step actually towards crafting coherence is developing your own understanding of the whole ecosystem that teachers are experiencing. So in order to support them to think about how any one of the professional learning opportunities fits together or could be brought into their practice, you actually have to know what was in that professional learning opportunity, right? So just two quick examples might be participate in some of those events if you haven't, or collect and compare the resources from them, right? What's the resource from this one? What's the resource from this one? Put it next to your curriculum that you're supporting teachers with. How can you see how they might fit together? Is a really important step for then you be able to support teachers to think about how they would fit together. So that's one thing that's not even yet interacting with teachers. That's crucial as a step towards crafting coherence for teachers. Then there's also little ways, again, in your locus of control that you can create space for teachers to make sense of their learning across different supports. So one thing I love doing is when I'm with teachers, I just add a little 15-minute routine, a little conversation of what of all the things you've experienced or had to do in the last week or month, what feels like it fits together and what does not feel like it fits together. That gives teachers an opportunity to think like across the different things they've been doing. And anything that surfaces about what doesn't fit together, that gives you a thing to lean into and think about how might I support teachers with that. Another really beautiful thing to do is to bring ideas or resources from one professional learning support into your work with teachers or into another professional learning space, right? So often each thing has a different handout. What happens if we bring a handout from another thing into a coaching cycle or into a learning lab to help teachers make sense of the different experiences they've had in relation to each other rather than these isolated little silos? So those are just some examples of the grain size you might think of. Okay. Again, it can be easy here to get stuck in, oh, this is overwhelming and I don't have control over a lot of what teachers are expected to do or a lot of the opportunities that teachers have. Just like set that aside for right now and think about what is in my locus of control to craft it so it might be a little bit more coherent for teachers or support teachers to make sense of how things might fit together or not. All right. We're going to give you a moment to process in your groups here. So we're going to have about 12 minutes this time. And here's what you're going to think about. Given the potential incoherences we identified earlier, what I'm going to emphasize what little strategies, right? What are little things we could do to try to craft coherence for teachers across their different learning supports so that the learning from those different spaces might be more likely to make it into their practice so that kids might experience something even more powerful. Okay, so we're gonna, just like last time, brainstorm in little groups and then we'll come back in and share out on a slide out some ideas that we come up with as a community.
Rooms are open.
All right, team, welcome back. And just like last time, let's share what we came up with. And I want to emphasize no strategy is actually too small here. We need all the strategies. So let's share what we came up with. What could we try within our locus of control to craft coherence across these different pieces of the literacy ecosystem that teachers are striving to learn and teach with? All right, let's see what some of the great ideas we have. So I see some ideas for what you might do at the end of a PD. I see this idea even just of naming how many things. Sometimes we don't name the hard parts, and that actually makes it harder for teachers to navigate the hard parts. So naming that there's a lot of different expectations and policies and supports that they're trying to navigate through can actually be a really important little move to make. Yep. Bite-sized pieces, continuing to connect to past learning. Learning labs, making connections between PDs. So I love also this thinking about for elementary teachers, what we're not even getting to in the conversation we had today is they are also receiving and participating in all sorts of expectations and supports for math teaching, for other content areas, right? That's another space to try to craft coherence for folks. So this idea of like layering and helping teachers see how things come together. Seeing people see new things next to past things is another great way to help people move from one thing to the next. Yep, I love this. How do we name an elephant? One bite at a time. A couple things I would lift up. So anything we can do to not assume that folks are bringing forward past things from other spaces, right? Teachers are busy. Whenever they come to you, they're thinking about whatever happened in the last hour. They're not thinking about what you worked together last time or the time before or that PD they had on Thursday with someone else. They're not thinking about that. So anything you can do, even just in 5 minutes, I'll just name 2 moves that I made today that may or may not have helped you craft coherence between this and Institute. I gave you a moment to say, what stuck with you from Institute? And then I spent about 10 minutes just going through some of the big insights that emerged for us. So being able to do that helped your brains get into where was I before, which then can help you, maybe you can reflect on whether that helps you, help you connect the different experiences over time, right? So even a little routine at the beginning of anything you're doing to say, what did you learn about in these last 2 things that you were at, whatever they were, whether they were you or someone else, helps you like, it's almost like if you imagine like sewing 2 pieces of fabric together, you just put a little loop through those fabrics, right? You just put one stitch that if you keep making those stitches, thank you for the support for my juggling here. You can support people to stitch things together over time. Lots of really beautiful ideas here. This is also something I'll just name to puzzle through together, right? As you're learning about new things, to think about how could we help this connect to this other thing for teachers? It's a really beautiful conversation to start having together on an ongoing basis. So to wrap up here, I think this is the space we were learning in today. We are thinking about how any professional learning experience, whether that be a coaching cycle or one of these programs that is on this list from MDE or a learning lab, any of those things can be experienced just as disconnected support, or they can be experienced as like fitting together somehow for teachers so that they can make sense of what to do in their classroom. So that is where our job comes in, is thinking about what are the little ways I can craft coherence for teachers so that it is connected as much as possible given my locus of control. What I want to name is that it takes tiny strategies over time from everybody. So one last nudge I would give you is that because it's everyone's job, one of the biggest things you can do is actually, oh, this didn't show up. I didn't refresh my screen. Is actually, let me escape that so it does come up, is actually learn with your colleagues about coherence. So as we just noticed, this hopefully supported you to start building this clarified vision of what it actually means to craft coherence. If everyone in your different building sites that you work in or in the districts you work in starts to build this shared vision, that's where you can actually start working together to support coherence for teachers. It's not something I want to name. Do not walk away feeling like this is all on your shoulders. It takes a full leadership team of everyone who's supporting a group of teachers to think about how are we making this all feel coherent and manageable for teachers. So thinking about who's one colleague I could bring these slides to and talk through these ideas with could be a really powerful next step in terms of thinking about crafting more coherent learning spaces for your teachers. Because what it takes is really sewing together lots of different kinds of strategies that different kinds of positions have power over or not to enact, right? The role that a principal can play in crafting coherence is really different than the role you can play in crafting coherence. And we actually need both of those. All right. That is our time for today. I so appreciate the encouragement. I'm glad you got to meet my little one this morning. And I'm glad she waited till the end to join us. Uh, I'm loving getting to think with you all, and I'm hoping we get to think it together again soon. Thank you so much for spending time thinking about this together with me this morning.
All right. Thank you, Allison, for this time with us to help us think deeply about professional learning and how we can craft coherence. I see lots of love happening on the Zoom for you. So hopefully you have a minute before you go be mom just to suck some of or take some of that in is probably the better word to say that. So thank you so much. We appreciate you and your expertise and nudging us to think about coherence today and moving forward.